So as Chris said, I'm project manager on Calls Hub. Director is currently Ollie Duke Williams. It was previously Chris, so we've had a bit of mix and match. And Hill, I don't know if he's here today, Hill Kulu from St Andrews is also involved. Anyway, so as you've heard, in the UK we're very lucky. We have these three LSs. We have the Scottish Longitudinal Study, we have the Northern Ireland Longitudinal Study, and the ONS Longitudinal Study. Each with their support units in Belfast, Edinburgh, and a few locations in England. And CALLS was basically created to try and bring together the three LSs, try and sort of harmonise them, help to promote them, and to support them in their work with the LSs. So what do? We provide information and resources. We have a help desk, which is web, email, telephone. We promote. We did a series of roadshows, and various other things which I'll mention, reports and things that we produce to try and promote the LSs with our Twitter feed and the website, which you'll see a bit more of. And another of our key tasks is to support eData Shield analyses. Now, I think the eData Shield has been mentioned. I'll explain a bit more about that further on. And our website, which is where most of the action takes place. So our website is calls.ac.uk, and there you'll find lots of information about all three of the census LSs that you've been hearing about. We have general information, news, events, sorry, I can't read the screen, information about the support units and about calls as well. We have a fantastic database of downloadable census forms, which is the most complete available online at the moment, I believe, which covers all the censuses involved in all the LSs. So you can see for 1971 we have the England and Wales ones, and then we start to bring in the Northern Ireland ones for 81 and so forth. And we have all the different Welsh language ones and everything, and even some shipping ones for 1971 if you really want to. I don't think they're very different, but we produce briefs and summaries and reports, so plain language summaries which take journal papers and try and translate them into a summary which is just more simple language that a layperson or third sector, someone who's not an academic, can access. We have research policy briefs, which are perhaps a slightly different pitch, but again they're summarising research that's been done with the data. And we have special reports like the citation analysis. I think Ian mentioned I'm in the process of updating that. That should be online soon. Where we've looked at all the journal papers that have been produced from 2010 to 2017, how many citations they've had, where they've been published. So it's all quite interesting. Another more recent development in the past year or so are thematic guides and webinars. So we currently have two of these online. One on using the census longitudinal studies for research on health and health inequalities, and one for research on internal migration. So as well as the thematic guides, which give an introduction to all the relevant variables and some examples, case studies of research in the field, you can also look at the webinars which are being recorded, and we have researchers, Martin van Ham, was one of them, Ian was in the most recent one as well. I was in the first one, talking about my research with the SLS. So they're really quite useful if you're thinking about using the data and a good introduction. We also have our outputs database where you can search for all different kinds of outputs, and you can search by year or by study, by keyword, by author. And for each output, as far as possible, we have abstracts, links through to the journal, and links through to the project, which can also be quite useful because you can see more about the project and other outputs that have been done. We also have our online data dictionary, which has a lot of different features on it, which I'll try and cover some of them. You can search for variables across all three LSs by description. If you know the name of the variable, you can go straight to it with the variable name. You can actually search the actual table, so you can look at all the education data in the SLS, for example. And you can limit it to one LS, or you can look at all LSs and find out all the data if you're doing a multiple LS study. And you can also just browse through the thousands and thousands of variables and the tables that are contained. We've added similarity scores, which are helpful if you're using more than one LS. So when you get your research results, there's a column there, similar, and that will tell you if there's a similar variable in one of the other LSs. And we also have a rating scale from 1 to 8 as to how similar it is. So if it's identical, that's will be really easy to do a comparison, or if it might need some work to tweaking to make it comparable. And the little arrow beside more gives you more details about the variable. So we have the restriction level, whether you as a researcher are going to be able to use it or whether the support officer will have to use it for you. Full descriptions, the similarity score. So for example, here there's an exact match in the UN SLS for this variable. And at the bottom we have the different categories and labels, and we're adding in frequencies to help you gauge what sort of sample size you might get. And at the top there, the little plus sign, you can actually create your own custom list of variables, which is really very helpful. So you can save lists of variables that you're interested in. You can review them, remove them from the list, and you can download them as a PDF or Excel file to discuss with people you're working with. And actually, for your application, it's quite helpful if you download an Excel spreadsheet and include that with your application. That can be quite useful as well. And you can even write notes, and they'll get downloaded with your saved list. So eData Shield that we've mentioned, that's one of the key functions of calls. It's possible now to combine data from more than one LS as though they were the same data set. Previously, you had to do research, and you can still do that. You can do research on the two different data sets and then do comparison between them. But now you can actually do a single analysis that uses the data together. And it does this by passing anonymized, non-disclosive data from each LS to myself. I combine them in the software that was developed by Gillian, who's not with us today, Gillian SLS. And then it's sent back out, and that's the iterations go on that way. And you can do all types of GLM models and survival analysis at the moment with this technique. So that gives you the possibility of regional comparisons or combining them to make a bigger UK-wide sample. And if you're interested, discuss it with the RSUs when you're applying for your project, or speak to myself later. Synthetic data has also been mentioned today. The SILS project was a cross-LS project, and it was led by Adam Dennett at UCL. And there's two different types of synthetic data that have been created. There's bespoke project data sets. Now, this was developed by Beata and Gillian at SLS. And they're currently available for SLS projects, and hopefully soon for the ONS and NILS as well. And bespoke synthetic data are a synthetic version of your project data. So that means that you're able to work on that in your own office, and you can refine your syntax, work on your models, create your models, get that all worked out before you make your visit to the safe setting, which saves a lot of hassle, if anyone who's used the SLS can testify. Being able to do all that work before you get there is a really helpful thing. And the other kind of synthetic data that's being created are synthetic spine data sets for the three LSs. The NILS one has only just been made available in the last fortnight. So we now have an ONS data set which has 560,000 cases in it. So if you're looking for getting your hands on some really big data to play around with or do some teaching, that's the one to really go for. So these synthetic data sets have Census 2011 teaching microdata and synthetic transitions back to 2001, so you've got a synthetic sample. They include variables like religion, number of births, marital status, health, a lot of quite interesting things. Not the full range of variables that are contained in the actual data, but enough to be useful. And they're very useful for teaching and for learning about using longitudinal data. And as I say, the size of the ONS one is also useful for getting hands-on really big data sets. 560,000 is quite a lot. And these are all available to freely download from the guides and resource section on the CALLS website. And I should say, the synthetic data is not intended to be published on. It's purely for, in the case of the spines, it's purely for learning and teaching, just getting a feel for the data. And in the case of the bespoke, it's for developing your syntax before you use the real data. And we're we don't want anybody publishing the synthetic data. It is synthetic. It behaves like the data, but it's synthetic. So that was all I was going to say. Please do get in touch with calls. We're online at Calls AC UK. You can get in touch with us by email. And please do follow us on Twitter. We regularly share announcements and papers and things relevant to all 3 LSs. Thanks very much for listening.